So thank you very much for coming to the last People in Nature Lab seminar of the year. I am Joanne Littlefair, lecturer at the People in Nature Lab and organiser of the seminar series. In the seminar series, we try to hear from people working with biodiversity, but in an interdisciplinary way. So the intersections between biodiversity and other disciplines, but also people who are working outside of academia. So people in industry who work for NGOs, who work for social networks and things like that. So today it gives me great pleasure to introduce from EcoActive and the Hackney Buzzline, Jerry Tizier and Rachel Cohen, who have come to speak to us about their projects, and I think have some really interesting thoughts about the intersections between pollinators and groups of people, community groups and schools, and urban greening. So Rachel is a postcode gardener who works with resident schools and community groups to green streets, estates and create pollinator habitats. And Jerry is there's so much to summarise.
I can introduce myself anyway, so.
No, I'm doing my best. Jerry is working with eco-social networks, so networks between species that are beneficial for biodiversity and people, and creating those. And Jerry completed a master's degree in wildlife conservation from UWE in Bristol, and is also an honorary research fellow at Queen Mary University of London.
But don't hold that against me.
Not at all, not at all. We're very fond of Queen Mary. So thank you, and I will let you begin.
Thank you very much.
Come in. So are you all from People in Nature Lab? No.
Most of you are. Well, it's very lovely to be here, and thank you for coming. My name is Jerry, and I do work for an environmental charity called EcoActive, which is based in Hackney, just a little further up here from the up the River Lee from here. And I am the manager and community ecologist on the Hackney Buzzline project, which we're going to talk with you today about.
Yeah, hi everyone, thanks for coming. So I'm Rachel, I work with Jerry on the project. I'm the postcode gardener, so gardening with local communities in the specific postcode that we work in. The Buzzline is a National Lottery Heritage Fund funded project. It's a 3-year project and we're just coming to the end of our 2nd year. So we're just going to talk a little bit about the challenges that we faced and our learning so far.
Oh, yeah. Well, we are going to read a little bit from this because we've got a lot of information to go through, and so what's the Hackney Buzzline? Hackney Buzzline is a 4-kilometre ecological corridor that we're creating for bees, butterflies and other pollinators that links 4 parks through 3 social housing estates in Hackney. And it's based on a very simple idea, which is to plant and create habitats every 100 to 200 metres along walking and cycling routes. And by doing that, we are creating a chain of what we call pollinator pit stops, which you can see along this blue line there. We developed the idea to support Hackney's local nature recovery plan that was introduced a couple of years ago. And the essence of that plan is to enhance habitats on Hackney's parks, but also to create better ecological connectivity between them. And all 4 parks on the Buzzline, 1, 2, 3, 4, are local sites of importance for nature conservation, and the trees and the orchards and the hedges and the scrub and the long grass areas and the meadows on them all provide valuable habitat for insects and for other wildlife. And we also want to encourage people, residents in the area, to contribute to the growth of the Buzzline as well. And so to do that, we have created a Hackney Buzzline community map. And if people are planting for pollinators or doing things for pollinators, then we just ask them to send a photograph and say a few words about what they're doing. And then we add that to the map. And in that way, through their efforts, they form like a corridor here, which you can see in the yellow shaded area. And that corridor is growing organically depending on how often people do that. So Hackney was once a place of fields and streams and woodlands and brooks and meadows and market gardens, all of which would have been buzzing with bees and butterflies. And the parks and the big green spaces that we have now are the remnants of that rural past, and our pollinator heritage is linked to that. And even in more recent times, bee and butterfly filled summers are part of the memories of certainly older people like myself. And it's a shame that children today won't share in those memories and are likely to see the degraded state of nature that we have now as normal. Agricultural intensification has meant.
I need to find a solution. 1 second.
I'll check online. So keep going.
Keep going? All right, I'll keep going. Yeah, so talking about agricultural intensification meant that we've lost over 97% of our meadows in the UK over the last 100 years. And pesticide use and climate change and urbanisation are other key factors of drivers of pollinator decline. Although in cities, some generalist species, like black-tailed bumblebee here, do thrive, whereas more specialist species, like the brown-minded cardabee here, also recognising the brown-minded cardabee, struggle. And overall, insect diversity.
Are you using this in the next hour?
Sorry.
Can I borrow it? It's just to plug so the sound, because I don't know, I can't get it. Thank you.
Just needs you.
Yeah, I think Raphael would speak to you. Sorry.
There is an alternative seminar going.
I think, yeah. Sorry, Jerry.
Right.
Right, okay, that's sorted.
We good?
Yep.
Okay, so around 1 in 10 of the 350 plus species of bee, butterflies and moths that have been recorded around the Hackney Buzzline area are known to be at risk, and 30 of those species haven't been seen since the millennium. You'll be glad to know that our friend the brown-banded cardabee here is actually hanging on in parks up and down the Lee Valley, including the Olympic Park here. And so that's one reason why initiatives like the Hackney Buzzline matter. We know that many local people want to garden for wildlife, and they've told us so. And the question that we often get asked is, so what's this plant good for? And that's one question that we're trying to answer through the Hackney Buzzline project. So, no, it hasn't gone.
Maybe I need to press on this. Oh.
There we go.
Yeah, it should be able to use the arrows.
So, around 15 years ago, a team of experts led by Professor John Lawton was commissioned by the government at the time to look at how habitats could be restored across England. And their report said that in order to address this, we really need to do 4 things. Create bigger, more, better and more connected habitats. You may have heard of that before. And they said, if we can do this, then you can create resilient and coherent ecological networks that give wildlife populations all the resources that they need to thrive. And those 4 principles, bigger, better, more and joined, now underpin most of the nature recovery strategies that local authorities are introducing across England, including the Hackney Local Nature Recovery Strategy. And they're also the base of the Hackney Buzzline. That's what we are doing. We are creating connectivity between the parks by creating pollinator habitats on the streets and the housing estates. But Hackney is a very built-up area with a complex mosaic of potential pollinator habitats on the parks and allotments and community gardens and verges and balconies and planters, and of course thousands of private gardens. And only some of that green space is managed by Hackney Council. The rest is looked after by schools and housing associations and community bodies and residents. So if the ecological networks that we create in a city are dependent on connecting up those green spaces, then clearly they also depend on connecting up the people who shape and care for them. So we use this phrase eco-social network because we believe that in order to build connected habitats, we first need to build connected communities.
So this is part of my role as a postcode gardener. I'm trying to connect local people and participants to nature, reconnect them, get them to open their eyes a little bit to the green spaces around them. As we all know, living in London, we're very alienated. A lot of it on green spaces. We try to control the green spaces that we are around. And so I tried to draw attention to little moments of nature to kind of persevere despite these obstacles, like the dandelions pushing through the pavements, and seeing them instead of as weeds, as vital pollinating plants. So National London Park City, if any of you have heard of that initiative, is doing really great work to think about London, kind of reimagining it as a bountiful, connected landscape full of pockets of nature, and celebrating the biodiversity that exists between the concrete. So I try to teach people, especially the kids that I work with, how these green spaces can be places of magic and wonder and learning, where we can learn from natural systems that have evolved through millennia, about how balanced ecosystems can work, and how these spaces are pockets of resistance in a world that continues to damage the environment through the use of pollutants, chemicals, and monocultures. So our idea that the way that we try to engage people is to get them to notice first what's around them, and through noticing, they respect and appreciate a little bit more for the green spaces for their kind of inherent value rather than just their value for human use. And then through this, we can protect and care for them through things like the gardening sessions that I do, learning to identify the plants and the pollinators in the garden, and creating personal moments of connection that can open our eyes to the diversity that exists and the complexity of life. We really want to get the message across to people that work with us that not only can we repair the damage that we've done to our environments, but we can contribute to a richness as well. So yeah, this is a nice photo of us on an estate, Nightingale Estate in Hackney. A load of residents there. We planted up with planter with pollinating plants, and they continue to work on this now, which is really nice to see. And part of the thinking of the Buzzline is that in cities, ecological networks, they cannot be separated from social networks. So each stepping stone on the Buzzline has been created in collaboration with the residents, students, workers and volunteers that we work with. And the Buzzline couldn't happen without these guys. We need them because we need land access, we need the people power to create the gardens in the first place, and we need local groups to maintain the gardens after the project finishes, and we need their support in general. So part of my work is to teach people how to look after these green spaces. So we will do gardening sessions where we learn organic gardening technique, how to create wildflower meadows, how to create habitats suitable for particular bee species. We learn basic ecology skills, some IDing and surveying. We learn about plant life cycles, plant pollinator interactions, and I talk about the importance of local pollinators and the environmental issues that cause their decline. So we are strengthening communities along the Buzzline through our work. We share knowledge and resources between each other, and between both group members in the sessions and across organisations and initiatives in the borough. We're really lucky in Hackney, there's loads of great initiatives that are happening, lots of ecologically minded people. So we've got a lot of support in that way if we need support with certain resources or knowledge bases. Hackney is kind of a great blueprint for that, really. And we're trying to kind of fuse these social bonds to combat social isolation and strengthening these networks, to create a feeling of belonging and care for the space that we live in. And gardening is known to provide relief from mental health stresses. It creates a sense of connectedness with the people and the world around us, and it has great benefits to our physical health as well. So every little stepping stone on the Buzzline is a kind of gentle reminder of the care and attentiveness that we can put into our urban spaces.
Okay, so you can get a lot of information about wildlife-friendly gardening or holiday-friendly gardening from the internet quite easily, but it's got two main problems. And the first problem is that the term pollinator-friendly gardening is a very broad term. We have 270 different species of bee alone in this country. When you start adding in the butterflies and the moths and the wasps and the hoverflies and the other pollinators, you're talking about thousands of different species. And each of those species, you probably know, has its own habitat niche. They may forage on different kinds of plants. They may nest in different kinds of places. They'll fly at different times of the year. So you really need to tailor the resources that you're putting in to the species that you're trying to support. And of course, it's no good putting in resources for species that you haven't got in the area that aren't around you. You really need to take a species-specific approach. The second problem is that the information that's out there is not always reliable. So, for example, Sussex University did a study, and they found that many garden centre plants that are sold with a pollinator-friendly label are not actually particularly attractive to pollinators. And in fact, some of them may even have been sprayed with insecticide. So the other thing is that genericness miss out local context. So what works for one species in one area might not necessarily be as useful for another species in another area with a different plant pollinator community. So for us, rather than starting with a generic pollinator-friendly plant list, we start off by looking at first of what species we've got in the area, and then asking what they might need, and then building from there.
And so the way that we try to implement this is me and Jerry will go out and do quadrat and transect surveys along small segments of the Buzzline. So, for example, I did my first transect surveying through a housing estate last year, which was interesting. Actually, I ended up seeing quite a lot of different bees and butterflies. And then Jerry will do them through the parks, and we'll kind of be able to kind of compare the two. And once we have got an idea of what species we have in the area, we can then use some of our surveying data alongside some of the wider research to try and plant for those species. So I'll take a list of the top ranking plants, and I'll use different plants depending on what's suitable for the gardens. I'll then plant the gardens with those plants alongside the community. And then next year, when things have grown and there's a little bit more flora, we will go back and survey again and see if it's had any impact. So yes, this is kind of a continuing thing that we're doing, and obviously there's only two of us, so it can be quite difficult to get enough data together. But we are trying and persevering. And over the last 2 years, we've actually seen 160 species in total. And over 40 utilising the habitat resources we've created.
Yeah, so that's about 1 in 4 the species we know are using the resources that we've created. So I just like to show you a small selection of the insects that we've recorded, the pollinators we recorded, just because I think it shows the amazing diversity that we have around us, but also to come quite how beautiful they are as well. So just break it down, we have recorded 21 butterfly species over the last couple of years. We think that's probably pretty much all the butterflies that are around. We have recorded 9 bumblebee species, a honeybee, and 35 solitary bee species. There's probably a handful more that we haven't recorded or identified. Bee species, particularly the small bee species, can be very difficult to identify. In fact, some of them, you need to look at them under a microscope to get a reliable identification. And then in addition, we have identified over 100 different species of wasps, sawfly, moth, hoverfly, and other flies. We're not systematically surveying those groups because we just don't have the capacity between us to do that, but they are very biodiverse. And if we were able to do so, they would significantly increase the species richness that we are able to record.
Yeah, so this is some photos of us in action. We're creating different habitats across the buzzline, and you can see a massive range of age groups. We've got kids, got nursery kids, primary school kids, secondary school, and then we have local residents and volunteers as well. And we do quite a range of different habitat creations. So we've got more formal pollinator beds. We do wildflower meadows. We also do like unmown patches of grass, we just let grass grow. We make bee banks as well, and we make bee hotels. And they're all really accessible ways to kind of get different age ranges and people of different kind of knowledge bases to get involved and create and support their local pollinators. And as Jerry said, a lot of this advice around how good these habitats can be or how you should create the habitats has been anecdotal up until this point. So we try to work with some other local initiatives like the Buzz Club, which is running at the University of Sussex. And what they do is they collate citizen science data on bee hotels, is quite a big one that they're doing. And they get people to take a photo every month of the bee hotel and see which bees have visited, and then they can get a better idea of the kind of location of the bee bank, how that affects whether it's visited, which direction it faces, how high it is off the ground, and how big or small the hole sizes should be for the different types of bees. And then we can use some of this, we've used some of this evidence to try and make the best kind of habitats that we can. Another person we've been working with is Dr. Konstantinos, who's done some work on bee banks and what substrates you should use for a bee bank, whether you use kind of sand or sandy loams or compost, if any of these things affect mining bees coming to visit, and also the direction of it. With both, always sunny direction, the bees love the sun. But yeah, so all of these kind of ways are things that we've been doing are great ways to get local people to see the holistic, the cycles of nature, and to understand in a little bit more detail some of the ways that pollinators function, how they lay their eggs, their life cycles and things like that. And it's worked really well, and people become really excited about learning the new information.
Okay, we started the Buzzline 2 years ago now with a small pilot summer project where we planted up a flower bed for the youth club with children from the club. But before we did that, we looked at a research study which compared the attractiveness of over 100 different ornamental plants to pollinators. And from that, we selected 8 varieties that were in the top 6 plants most visited by bees that we had already recorded on the Hackney Buzzline. And so we started designing our habitats on the basis of that research. Then last year, I surveyed through quadrat surveys this flower bed. And I found, I recorded 26 different pollinator species using that flower bed. Bees, not surprisingly, accounted for most flower visits. But what I was able to show was there were really strong associations between particular bee species and particular flower varieties. So for example, a plant called Lambsir was visited by a solitary bee species called the wool carnaby more often than any other plant in the flower bed. And the wool carnaby visited the Lambsir plant more often than the other plant. And got the same preferences for all the other different bee species. Of course, some bee species are more generalist and some bee species are specialists, but each of those species had clear preferences. There were clear pairings in the plants that they visited and foraged on. So if you want to support pollinators, it's not enough just buying plants with a pollinator friendly label. This is the point we're trying to make. The plant species or variety that you choose and the mixed plants that you choose, they matter if you want to give the best possible support to a diverse range of pollinator species. So we're using what we learn to shape our plant choices for the Hackney Buzzline as we go on. And at the same time, we're also experimenting and adding in new varieties so we can test those. And in this way, each of the flower patches that Rachel was creating with the community act as both habitats and learning spaces for us. This year, I started monitoring plant pollinator interactions in 5 of the newer projects that Rachel's created, 2 planters, 2 flower beds, and 1 wildflower meadow. And as mentioned before, we've recorded over 40 pollinator species visiting them. And we're going to do some more work, so we're going to use the latest insights that we're getting from that to further refine our planting choices for next year. And we're also sharing them with local wildlife gardeners and groups, some of the strength of those eco-social networks that we've been talking about.
So we've been trying as much as possible to engage children from the 3 schools that are on the Buzzline, 3 inner city schools, where a lot of the kids don't spend too much time in green spaces at all. So we tried to kind of give them new opportunities. We've taken them to Kew Gardens, and we take them to local parks, do some surveying with them, and just trying to get them to engage with the green space a little bit more. A lot of the kids at the beginning have pretty negative associations with dirt and insects, and they don't like them. But then by the end of the session, they're normally finding the bees very cute, and they might be covered in dirt. So it's really lovely to see how in a short kind of time frame the kids can really change their associations with nature. There's a school called Kingsmead Primary School. This young girl is from the eco team there. So the eco team, me and Jerry work with a group of kids, and they do some more kind of specific tasks. They will do more IDing and surveying, and they've played a really key role in maintaining the garden space that we've made at the school. And Kingsmead have actually now gone to get a eco schools award, which is really great. We're also piloting a pollinator training course this year based on our 3-stage method. So in the summer, I went to 3 different schools on the Buzzline and took them to the local parks, and we did quadrat surveying using the fit count method. So that's just kind of differentiating different kind of flying insects into quite broad groups. But just getting them to look at the pollinators that are around them. And then in the autumn, I've gone in and done a gardening session with them. So they planted up an area in their school. Then we are going to put a bee observation box on the site near the habitat that we've created. And they're going to be able to see whether the bee hotels become occupied when we go back in the summer. We can kind of see, they're going to see the impacts of their work, which is going to be really nice for them to see this cycle. And we're going to use apps such as iNaturalist to help them to identify. So apps like that can be really kind of useful with gathering some of the citizen science data. And we also do kind of family days on Saturdays, because obviously weekday things are not always accessible for some families. So on the Saturdays, we'll do events in local community gardens with some games and food, and try to get them to kind of look at the world around them, do some surveying techniques, and hoping that this will have a ripple effect on their friends and family and people around them. So this is one of the projects that we did last year, which was a super successful project. It was called the Memory Garden, and it was so successful because it was kind of we were directly responding to a community request, which was to make a green space in the middle of the estate in order to celebrate the lives of three ladies that passed away in really close succession, that were kind of core members of the estate. They worked in the doctor's surgery and this and that. And so the family came to us and asked us to create this green space for them. And we kind of realised through doing this project how important it is for things to be community led in urban spaces, because our project is 3 years long, but when the project ends, we need these spaces to continue. Otherwise, all of the pollinating habitats that we create will disappear as things just change so quickly in urban settings. And this is particularly good because we have had this local energy and support. They continue to maintain this space. Even now, they continue to add to it and use it. And it means that the garden is going to continue after the project finishes, which is really great. Another nice thing we've got here are these mosaics. We created these with the Hackney Mosaic project, which are another really nice local project. They make mosaics with homeless people. They help to make the mosaics, and we use them as signposts so that people can see the buzzline as a kind of continual corridor. So yes, this is just kind of a good case study on what works with community engagement, which is kind of a big challenge that we face, is how do you get local people involved and how do you keep them involved and kind of facilitate the continuation of these spaces. And it's basically going with the energy of initiatives that are already happening and just try to support what is already going on. Another big challenge we face is more of a cultural challenge. So this is an area that we're going to be working on in the spring, and as you can see here, this kind of yellow bit of grasses, it's been glyphosated. So this is still a chemical that's being used on this particular estate, and it is used still across the UK. It's actually banned in France because they have realised how bad it is for human and animal health. But we're still using it in order to kind of maintain this neat and tidy, spotless aesthetic in urban spaces. So you'll probably spot this in the summertime. Any verges and curbs, if there's like crispy vegetation, that's just been glyphosated. And so what we are trying to do with the buzzline and with the green spaces that we create is to change this this kind of very ingrained cultural idea of what green spaces are for and what they should look like. You know, mown spaces, pristine lawns and weedless beds and things like this. It's kind of a hangover from when lawns became popularised, you know, in England back in the 17th century. And then all of these kind of pollutants and chemicals that were sold and marketed, fertilizers, pesticides, they've kind of been marketed to maintain these green spaces as pristine and actually as biological deserts. I'm sure you are all aware that lawns are basically biological deserts and they don't provide any forage or habitat at all. So part of my job is trying to get residents to understand this and understand why we're making these changes to their local area. A lot of people on estates feel that they can't let weeds grow, they can't let their lawns grow because it's a kind of symbol, you know, a symbol of your status and your wealth and things like that, and they don't want their areas to appear unmanaged and unmaintained. So what I'm trying to do is trying to understand how I can design gardens that are both wild whilst also looking cared for. So things like having good structural designs to your garden, different canopy layers, really nice colour schemes going on, and then leaving areas to be unmown, leaving areas to grow, and then mowing the curbs, mowing around the edges, and just making it look cared for, because I think that's what it boils down to, is people want to feel like their area is cared for. So yes, and more we have realised the importance of these little pockets, whether they're in people's back gardens, in the front of apartment blocks, or whatever it is. It's now not only desirable to make these green spaces flourish, but it's necessary. It's necessary to restore the damage that we have done to our local ecosystems and pollinator populations. So we're trying to imagine if all of these pockets of green spaces were brimming with life and what that would look like.
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at that space there in front of the block there, the green space, I mean, it's already pretty lifeless. And there's a row of paving slabs going through it, and it's like, what is the point of glyphosate along there? I mean, it's just completely pointless. And then the other photo is actually a children's centre where before the Hackney Buzzline, we created a flower bed in front of there, pollinator-friendly flower bed, and they just came in, they've just heaved it all over. And this is the children's centre. I mean, these are the kind of challenges, some of the challenges we're facing, but things are changing.
Mm.
Okay, we're going to get a bit more scientific now. Results from the analysis from the transit survey I did on butterflies. So last year I recorded over 700 different butterfly individuals from 17 species that we had last year on the parks and transit surveys. And that data set then allowed me to explore two questions, which was how park habitats are affecting butterfly numbers, and secondly, whether some parks are better for butterflies than others. So a data analysis that I did revealed that there were significant differences between park habitats and the butterfly groups that they support. Perhaps not surprisingly, the long grass and the meadow areas were supporting high numbers of grassland butterfly species. Woodland areas were supporting woodland butterfly species, and the scrub areas were producing a more mixed picture. But kind of most importantly, that what was coming out was that mown grass was the worst habitat. Mown grass makes up 80% of the area on Hackney's parks, certainly parks that we're looking at. But it provides the poorest butterfly habitat and the poorest habitat for other insect species as well. Whereas meadows, on the other hand, were providing the best habitat. They were supporting the highest number of butterflies overall, and they had the highest species richness. So a simple takeaway from this is that if you want to, you have to start a nature recovery plan. If you want to increase butterfly diversity on your parks, then the quickest and most effective way of doing this is simply to let grass grow long, or even better, to create wildflower meadows to get more forage from that as well. And on the Hackney Buzzline, that's what we're doing now with the council. We're working with the council to do exactly that. The story doesn't quite end there though, because even accounting for the habitat differences, some parks were better for butterflies than others. And the analysis doesn't enable us to say why that is, but it might be due to factors such as some parks might be more secluded than others. It might be to do with the quality of the habitats around them, the environment around them. Or it might be due just the complexity of the habitat diversity in the parks. We just don't know. We haven't looked at bees yet. For bees, the picture is probably more fine-grained. And how well a park supports bees may be more closely linked to the forage that park provides for the bees, and also the availability of nesting sites for them as well. So it might be looking at what you can do for bees in parks. It might require more targeted interventions for them. So that's on the parks. Some of the that's a method that we created earlier this year. We had a virtual product. So we wanted to find out. We still want to find out how our plant choices and the habitats that we are creating in the projects can support the pollinator species that we have found on the Buzzline. Although we're very aware that understanding the impact of the small planting project on a local population is an extremely difficult thing to do. However, we do know from research that suitable pollinator forage and availability of nesting resources are often limited in built-up areas. And in this situation, generalist species that forage on a large range of plants and can exploit diverse habitats may increase their population size. Specialist species who can't do that are likely to decline. They can't get the resources that they need. So what you end up with in the city is a handful of very common species Uh, a few very rare ones, and some are kind of somewhere in between. So, for example, out of the 9 bumblebee species that we've found on the Hackney Buzzline, 2 of them, the buff-tailed bumblebee and the common carder bee, account for 98% of all the observations of bumblebees, and all the rest of them catch us for 2% of those. And so this then raises the question when we're doing this: what species should we be focusing on if we want to do nature recovery and biodiversity? So again, goes back to the kind of plant, pollinator-friendly plants. We could, for example, put in plants that are highly attractive for those 2 very common bumblebees, and also for the honeybee. And most of the pollinator-friendly labels you get are just about attracting, they're attractive to those kind of bees. And there's a very broad list to choose from. I mean, the RHS has a list of thousands of pollinator-friendly plants. Yeah, you put them in, we'll get a lot of plants. A lot of time we'll get a lot of bees. But it's unlikely to make a significant impact on their populations. And really, what you're doing there is you're kind of helping the winners to win even more in the bee competition race, as it were. Alternatively, you could plant for the kind of really rare, the much rarer bees like the brown-banded carder bee. But again, with small habitat interventions, because they are so scarce, they're probably unlikely to be using them. And for them, in reality, it's probably the more large-scale habitat interventions that are going to be more of use for them. So kind of where we are at the moment, I think our best approach might be to create habitats and plant for the group in the middle, which are scarcer. They're less common, but not particularly scarce, or they might have naturally declining populations, such as the red-tailed bumblebee there, which is on the Hackney Buzzline, and it's known that its population is declining nationally. And that's possibly where we are likely to be able to make the most difference, and perhaps even tipping the balance from decline into recovery, certainly on a local level.
So these a couple of quotes from some feedback we've got from these 2 participants who are family of the Golden Girls that we made the memory garden for. So we do try to get feedback from participants, mainly for our funders, but also so that we can kind of tailor what we're doing to suit people and grow and learn from the sessions that I'm providing. And we've got really good feedback so far. A lot of people are more engaged with nature, have learned skills. We've had some people go on to start initiatives of their own, which is lovely, and join other groups. But we have had issues with trying to get to people who aren't already in our normal networks, in our normal circles. And I think with community engagement, this is kind of a problem time and time again, is how do you reach people who need to be reached, the people who are less likely to be engaging with this kind of material. So trying to think of different ways to do that, whether it's leafleting, knocking on people's doors, just chatting to people on the street, emailing, what else do we do? WhatsApp groups, things like this. It's kind of trying to do many avenues to reach people. And I think we've realised it just takes time. It just takes time. You've got to be visible. You have to be around. And because of the nature of the Buzzline, we move basically every 6 weeks. We move to a different spot. And because of this, it's quite hard to kind of build a pool of volunteers that feel an emotional attachment to the piece of land that we're working on. It's kind of not it's not like a community garden that basically will be place-based for many years and it can kind of gather energy in that way. We're moving through the area. But people do have things to say about all the things we do as well. So we do get sometimes some not negative, challenging feedback from people who maybe aren't aware of what we're doing, don't understand why things are changing. So it's about kind of trying to keep that channel of communication open between people and so that they can understand why their green areas are changing. So yes, that is kind of one of the challenges of growing these nature-friendly communities. It's just the luxury of time, basically. So we hope that after the project finishes, we'll just continue to be able to build these networks.
Okay, almost there now. So we mentioned how we are surveying pollinators on the Hackney Buzzline, but there are only two of us, Rachel and me, which really severely limits the amount of surveying that we can do in the amount of data that we can collect on our own. We don't really have capacity to survey more than the parks and some of the projects that we're working on. We can't do all the other community, small community spaces. And we certainly can't do private gardens because we can't get into people's private gardens. So we really need to, and we really want to engage the community in pollinator monitoring more. That actually doesn't just help bring in more data, but it's also a really good way of connecting people to nature, which is really important for us as well. It encourages people to notice nature more, and there's a lot of research to show that that is the first step to taking action to help nature. So we really want to get people on that journey. However, it's challenging because systematic data collection requires two things really. It requires good species ID skills, and it can be quite difficult identifying species, and it also requires the time commitments as well. And do it in a structured way. Both those can be real challenges to community engagement. So we have now partnered with UCL Nature Smart Challenge to try and address those challenges. And next year we're hoping to be working with a group of MSc Ecology students here to look at how we can support schools and children, community gardeners, residents and other people in both creating pollinator habitats, but also, just as importantly, monitoring the impact of those on pollinators. And our ultimate goal here really is to develop a scalable citizen science approach that can be used more widely as a model for community-powered nature recovery. So the Hackney Buzzline is growing and it is spreading. Pollinators have now been identified as a priority. London's emerging local nature recovery plan, and the Hackney Buzzline is included as a strategic priority area in that plan as part of a new green corridor, which is called the Lower Lee Valley Urban Fringe. We are developing pollinator-friendly gardening courses for community gardens, for our local council, and for other interested people. We're inviting more people to add their gardens to the Hackney Buzzline community map. And we've also started working with partners to extend the Buzzline corridor further into East London. And we've got some exciting ideas to inspire and mobilise Londoners to create their own corridors and pollinator plots. And the Buzzline idea is also spreading globally. This year in Uganda, a youth group called Marafiki was inspired to create their own Kampala Buzzline in Uganda's capital city. As part of this, we went to schools on the Buzzlines, and earlier this year we set up a gift exchange between them. So the children in Hackney made butterfly masks, the children in the Kampala primary school, and then they made their own gifts to bring back to Hackney. And there's a couple of the children in Uganda actually wearing the masks that were made by the Hackney kids that as you saw in the local paper. And last month, the World Wildlife Fund recognised the Kampala Buzzline as one of Uganda's most innovative conservation projects, and it has given it seed funding to set up Africa's first ever pollinator plant nursery. And on the last slide. So we started the talk by asking the simple questions, which is what happens when an eco-restoration project becomes a neighbourhood project. And for me, this is really about redefining connectivities. Ecologically, we talk about those coherent network of habitats, the more bigger, better, joined up approach. But at the Central City, those networks only exist if people create and maintain them. So to build connected habitats, we first need to build connected communities.
Yeah, this is a nice photo of us again from the memory garden. I like that photo. Thank you guys all for listening to some of the things that we've learned about. I think the main things that we've taken away is just having these ecological, in an urban space, having these ecological projects integrated with the people that live there is vital. For this one anyway, it's vital. and to have the support of local people and to kind of galvanise the knowledge systems and the people power in these that are there in city urban spaces in order to make a project successful.
Yeah, so that's it really. I mean, we've tried to share some of the findings and some of the learnings of what we've done over the last couple of years. This project is still live. We're still learning loads of stuff. But we think we have shown that it is possible and it is powerful to create these ecological corridors. And you know, we can do it in Hackney, then we can do it in any other borough, we can do it in any other city and do it worldwide. But thank you very much for listening, and yeah, any questions?
Yeah, thank you very much. That was super, Jeremy and Rachel. And we have got a few minutes of questions. So if anyone would like to add something, and I will also monitor the chat online. Thanks.
Thanks for that presentation. Brilliant stuff. Really inspirational. My question was around that glyphosate spraying. I think John Little, who's been doing the other stuff on building for insects, you know, in community gardens, he was kind of promoting the idea that really, in order to change that behaviour, it's not the residents, they don't want it either. It's the contract for the maintenance of the garden, which is the problem. So like changing those contracts which are managing that space is the key to a lot of this, because the person who's spraying is just doing it because it's on a tick sheet, and actually it's the contract from the council that needs to be attacked and changed and challenged. So what have you had any experience with that in your project?
Yeah, I think there's a certain truth in that. I think there's a kind of relationship between them. So actually, the Hackney Buzzline project grew out of an earlier project that we were doing with Friends of the Earth. That was called 10 Times Greener, where the postcode gardener came from. And on that project, we were originally greening up a street, working with residents, greening up the street and then the neighbourhood. So we were planting around tree pits and things like that. And then what the council came, they just glyphosate that all off. So it's really depressing everybody. So we approached Hackney Council and said, please can you stop spraying killing all the plants that we're putting in? And the Hackney Council is a great council. So they said they were willing to trial a glyphosate-free zone in that area. They were willing to do it in that area because we had built up a kind of more nature-friendly community. So they were worried about the kind of kickback from residents. So they did. So we became the first glyphosate-free area in Hackney, and they didn't get any great kickback from residents. And in fact, after they did that, we commissioned an urban botanist come and identify all the plants that were grown down one street in Hackney, and she found over 60 different species of wild plants just growing in the pavements. But as a result of not spraying the pavements, and Hackney is now rolled that out across Hackney. So Hackney's now one of the best boroughs in the country actually for not using glyphosate. Occasionally residents do spray glyphosate. We've seen them, but I mean, you can explain more.
Well, it's just quite an old kind of school thing to do, isn't it? And it's quite ingrained in some of the older residents' minds of how they need to kind of maintain their garden. So it doesn't happen that often, but some residents do. And also housing associations, they do still use glyphosate. It's just an easier way for their maintenance teams to come in, get the job done. So what we are trying to do, and what we will be doing next year, is doing some kind of ecological gardening training with these housing associations. It is one of our biggest barriers, is doing all of this amazing work and then people coming in from outside and either cutting it all down, mowing it, or glyphosating it. And it's just really disheartening. But yeah, we do need to kind of go to these maintenance teams, to the housing associations, and try to make systemic changes in that way. Yeah.
But there's a cultural shift that's going on. So it's easy to get to top, but you mustn't get to the top because things are changing.
They are, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. A really, really interesting talk. I'm a happy resident.
Hey.
It's an area.
Hey.
So you know, this looks like a great model for this kind of thing, and obviously part of it, as Kate alluded to, challenging, like, what are the people in Hackney Council needing this explained? Why are you still doing this? So what's the sort of, the landscape of funding for carrying on this project? Because this looks like a great idea. Are you going to be able to carry it on after 3 years? Are you going to get continued funding?
Good question.
Is that what?
So we've got some more pots of funding to do training. And we just got a grant to provide training for community. Looking further forwards, the London Local Nature Recovery Plan, which produced a draft. There was a consultation a couple of months ago, and that has identified the importance of biodiversity monitoring. They say it should be a precondition after any further funding in nature recovery areas. So that's one of the reasons that we're particularly keen to explore this and work with UCL in order to work out a model, because nobody knows how to do this.
But we do.
Thank you. I'm conscious of the time. I just have one question from somebody online, which I'll read out. Are there any online resources for people with gardens in E5 listing which plants are good for local populations?
You should say that. The answer is no at the moment, but we are have an embryonic list of plants, of pairings between plants and the pollinator species that just English plants species about which species most of all. Rachel's a bit concerned about it because he says it's too early days to put this out.
Well, yeah, we just know that some species are more generalist and some are more specific, and we need more time and more, capacity to be able to finalise a list. I just feel like once you put it out there, it's out there, and I want it to be backed, by good data. But there's definitely resources that we can share with this person of some of the research that I use to plant my gardens and things like this. So yeah, there's definitely a plant list that I can share.
But what we want to offer is locally tailored lists of local species, the plants that we know grow in the area as well. So they've also got to be able to grow in those conditions and evidence based.
Okay. Thank you so much. Let's give a final thank you.